Oh, good evening, and welcome to Chapter 2 of I, Jedi, read by me, DK, and not only read, but discussed by, and, probably analyzed a little bit, and it'll confuse me, I'm sure. What I'm saying is, hello. If you haven't heard the first chapter, you should probably do that first. Otherwise, I think I'm just going to jump straight into Chapter 2 with our good friend, Corran Horn. The Kavath system was far enough from Coruscant to be trendy and desirable for seclusion, though the price of a mug of lum there would have been enough to discourage most folks from enjoying their holiday. I think lum is like Star Wars rum? I hope so. Mirax and I never would have gone there 3 years ago, but Wedge Antilles had recommended it. Someone in management had been convinced that our participation in the liberation of Coruscant made Mirax and me just the sort of glam couple to attract the notice of the New Republic's fashionable elite. As a result, we didn't pay for anything while we were there, and stopping the bootyful over Alicatha helped me feel a bit better about having enjoyed the world's hospitality. Good old bootyful. The Glimmer Star requested an escort all the way to Coruscant, which Home One agreed to supply. This meant our return trip would be at the leisurely pace dictated by the liner instead of the faster speed of which the Mon Calamari cruiser was capable. The rogues could have taken our X-Wings home, but the trip would have locked us in the cockpit for a full 24 hours, which I looked forward to with the same enthusiasm I had for discussing old times with Mirax's father. Would have been nice if the Glimmer Star had allowed us to spend the extra day of travel time on the liner, but their gratitude extended only as far as letting us study the ship's beautiful lines from afar. We had duties enough to keep us busy anyway. Despite the oppressive humidity, the Mon Cal cruiser's accommodations were not that bad. After landing the Mon Cal cruiser, is that because those fish people, the Mon Calamaris, needed to be humid because they're fish people? That makes sense. As long as it's not a trap. Anyway, after landing my X-Wing and getting Whistler set up for recharging, I caught a quick meal in the galley and joined the rest of the squadron in a briefing room for our debriefing. What, you going to the briefing room to get debriefed? What is this? We all rode Reem. Remy. I think it might be Remy. I don't know. Remy. The one who went extravehicular. The only one who was even forced out of their ship during the battle in Chapter 1. But we were glad to have her back and enjoyed her descriptions of the Glimmer Star's blast boat. After that, I grabbed some rack time, slept for 8 hours, worked out a bit, and headed for the galley for some breakfast. Oral raised a three-fingered hand and waved me over to the table he occupied all by himself. I smiled and nodded to him, and grabbed some breakfast cakes and an artificial Nerf milk protein beverage. I almost balked at it, because consuming anything that doesn't sit well on the stomach can be a mistake while eating with a Gand. But I was very thirsty. I dropped into the chair opposite Oral and did my best not to glance down into the bowl from which he was feeding. Feeding. Anything interesting happened while I've been down? Oral's mouth parts moved apart in his approximation of a smile, and his compound eyes glittered brightly. His gray-green flesh was of a hue slightly darker than the sauce on the tentacles he was fishing out of the bowl, and contrasted sharply with the bright orange of his flight suit. Knobby bits of his exoskeleton poked at odd angles from within the fabric, as if his flesh were having an allergic reaction to the color. Nothing Oral considers out of the ordinary. I frowned. The Gans had a tradition of speaking of themselves in the third person and not using the pronoun I, because they thought it was the height of arrogance to do so. Only those Gans who had committed acts so great that all Gans would know of them were allowed to speak of themselves as I. The whole Rogue Squadron had even gone to Gand, had been part of Oral's Janween Jika, the ceremony that conferred that right upon him. For him to revert it to third person meant something was bothering him. What's the matter? I narrowed my green eyes, stared into the black, faceted orbs. You can't be embarrassed about getting shot by that invid. Oral slowly and deliberately shook his head. Oral is ashamed that he has not been able to help you with your problem. My problem? You've been distracted, Corran. Oral perched his hands on the table like two armored spiders. You and Mirax desire offspring. If Oral was on Gand, Oral could help solve this problem. I stuffed the crumb of one of the cakes into my mouth, chewed quickly and swallowed. Back up here. How do you know about the child thing? The Gand remained rock still for a moment, then lowered his head. Quirg. Qrgg. I'm going to say that's Krig? Quirg? Craig. It might be Craig. I don't know, that's a weird one. Craig was told by Mirax that you and she would have children. Therefore, Craig, oh man, had to do... So that's how he was referring to himself? Craig. I'm going to call it Craig. Had to do Craig's best to make certain you were not killed in combat. I gave him a hard stare. Mirax talked to you about our discussion on children? Mirax wished to know if you had spoken with Craig about the discussion. When Craig said you had not, she asked Craig to encourage the discussion if you did. Oral's head came back up. You should not have been ashamed to speak to Oral of it. Oral would have been worthy of your trust. I gave Oral the biggest smile I could muster. I over-exaggerated it, because he wasn't so good at reading subtlety. Oral, if I was talking to anybody about our wanting kids, it would have been you. I trust you with my life every day, and have never had any cause to regret it. I saw his mouth parts open, aping my smile, and realized right then that I'd been fairly stupid in keeping the whole discussion to myself. And I really should have spoken with you about it. Your advice has always been welcome and wise. I just didn't think, which is a bad habit I had hoped to abandon. If Oral was truly wise, Oral would have advised you to abandon it. Why is he calling himself Quirg and then he's calling himself Oral? I don't know what that's about. Someone explain it. You have, in very many ways. I sighed slowly. And as Mirax told you, we have been talking about having kids. She went to you to learn what I was thinking. I'm sure any help you offered her was appreciated. Oral would like to think so. You will recall that during Oral's Janwin Jika, Oral was also initiated into the ways of being a Finesman. On Gand, the Finesman performs many useful tasks. He locates lost slaves, reads the mists for omens, and hunts criminals. There is one more duty he performs for people like you and Mirax. He can wander into the mists and find the child they desire. These mistborn children are a gift and raised by the people as their own. I would be honored to do this for you, my friend. I smiled. Thanks, but I think I can handle the child production part on my own. Oral's mandible sprang open. Then you are capable. Yes, very much so, I raised my chin. Very much so. No problems here. A membrane nictated? I don't know that word. Nictated. That's a new one. Nictated. Nictated. Up. I'm going to need a thesaurus or something, or dictionary, whatever that book is with all the words in it. Phone book, I guess. A membrane nictated up over Oral's eyes for a moment. Then why would you not have a child already? Huh? This is the purpose of life, is it not? To create life is the greatest act a living creature can commit. The solemnness and truth of his words hit me hard. Solemnity. Solemnity? Oh, solemnity. Man, these words. It's almost like this guy was like a real book-writing guy. The solemnity and truth in his words hit me hard. That's true, but is this the time Oral should remind you that you are trying to abandon being thoughtless? I snapped my jaw shut and narrowed my eyes. If having kids is so important, then why don't you have any? Oral shrugged. It was an emotion natural to him, and his exoskeleton clicked in protest. I am Janwin. It is not for me to choose a wife, but for Gan to choose one for me. At that time, I shall proudly commit genetic fusion. The idea loses something in translation there. I drank a bit of the milk and used another piece of cake to get rid of the thick, chalky taste. The fact is, I mean to settle this thing with Mirax once we get back to Coruscant. Good. With the stories you have told of your father, any child you will have will be well cared for. I arched an eyebrow at him. How do you know I'll agree to have children? I have spoken with Mirax. That is enough. I sat back and laughed lightly. I never really did have a chance, did I? No, Corin. But that really means you will have every chance. Oral slurped in a tentacle, then wiped verdant gravy from his cheek. We have all helped create and strengthen the new republic. Creating the generation to which it will be passed is one more duty we owe posterity. Oral's words stuck with me through the rest of the trip and worked on me like a virus. By the time I loaded myself into my X-Wing and began to descend to our hangar facility, I was looking forward to heading home with Mirax and start working on a child then and there. And while that sort of enthusiastic greeting when neither one of us returned from journeys was not at all uncommon. Haha, this guy does the sex. This time it would be more than a wordless way of saying, I missed you. It would mean parts of us would never be separated again. That thought struck me so right, so good. Even flying over the debris fields littering Coruscant could only slightly tarnish my mood. Vast swaths of destruction had been carved across the urban landscape. Ships never meant for entry into atmosphere had crashed down, glowing white from the heat, trailing thick clouds of black smoke to slam into the cityscape. They gouged great furrows through neighborhoods and blasted huge craters out of the buildings. Hundreds of millions, perhaps even billions of people had died in the factional fighting that followed Thrawn's assault on the New Republic, and we were nowhere near recovered from it. Looking at the shattered buildings and twisted wreckage, I found it difficult to conjure up my memories of Coruscant from before, back when it was still Imperial Center. I could remember vast rivers of light making the night side glow with life, but here only dull gray predominated. Bright lights had once given Coruscant an artificial life, and without them the urban planet seemed dead. I knew it wasn't really that bad. Despite the vast surface destruction and tremendous loss of life, people did continue living. The catastrophic damage did bring out the worst in some people, but it brought out the best and even more. Mirax and I had planned to live here in her Pulsar skate when our home had been destroyed. That's her ship, by one of the crashing ships, but friends wouldn't let us. Ayala Wasiri, I'm going to say it's Ayala, I-E-L-L-A, Ayala Wasiri, my old partner from the Corellian Security Force, managed to convince her boss at New Republic Intelligence that we should be given the run of a safe house they maintained. So we ended up with the place even closer to Rogue Squadron headquarters than before. Ours was hardly the most remarkable of tales. Supplies that had been hoarded for years during times of political instability suddenly poured forth. People took refugees into their homes, which seems hardly unexpected, but a lot of the hosts were old Imperial families, and the refugees were from the various non-human species in the galaxy. The battering Coruscant had taken at the hands of the Imperial warlords had broken down the last walls of resistance. Suffering formed a common bond that began to erode xenophobia on both sides. With the rest of the squadron, I made my approach and landed in our hangar bay. I turned the X-Wing over to a tech, changed into civilian clothes, and caught a hover bus south to the Manare. I'm going to say it's Monterey. M-A-N-A-R-A-I. Monterey Mountains. A mother and child in a seat up the way from me caught my eye. I watched the woman smile as the infant reached out unsteadily and grasped at her nose. She tilted her face up slightly, kissing the hand, then lowered her face until she was nose to nose with her baby. She whispered something and rubbed her nose against the child's, then pulled back, accompanied by the infant's laughter. The infant's delighted laugh still echoed in my ears as the bus broke from the darkened canyons and started flying across a ruined landscape of duracrete, I guess that's like concrete, duracrete chunks strewn like a dewback scales on a stable floor. The burned-out hulks of airspeeders lay twisted and half-melted all over the place. Scraps of cloth that had once clothed victims flapped and fluttered from various points in the stone piles. Bright bits of color that could have been anything from toys to the shards of a holodisc player littered the landscape. Despite the utter destruction, the child's laugh overwhelmed it all. The laugh was innocent and light. It mocked the ruin surrounding us. People could create and destroy, but the laugh seemed to suggest anyone who thought destruction was more powerful than creation was a fool. Within the first 10 years of that child's life, the scars from the battling on Coruscant would be erased, and even if they were not, that child could, in 20 or 30 years, be the person who saw to their erasure. Life truly was the antidote to destruction. I smiled. Mirax has been right all along, and Oral too. If we live for the present and in the present, and if we live for the present and in the present, if we live in the present, if we live for the present and in the present, we shortchange the future. Living for the future is necessary if we are to have any sort of future at all. Yes, Mirax, we'll have a child. Make that children. We'll make our contribution to the future. I winked at the woman with the child as I got off at my stop. I threaded my way through the buildings and over the catwalks that led to my home. I almost stopped at a store to buy a decent wine to celebrate the resolution of our problem, but decided instead to whisk Mirax off somewhere for a quiet romantic meal. I didn't know where we'd go exactly, but with the construction droids roaming over the planet, I knew there would be dozens of restaurants that had been created in the week I'd been gone. Finding a place to eat wouldn't be much of a problem. I hit the door and punched the code into the lock plate. The door slid open and a wave of warm air cascaded down over me. I stepped into the apartment's darkened interior, letting the door close around me. Around me. He got shut in the door. Letting the door close behind me. The warm air surrounded me like a thick blanket, and for a moment I almost gave in to panic because it seemed suffocating and dense. My high spirits began to die down. The air had become warm because Mirax had shut off the apartment's environmental comfort unit. We both did that when we were going to be gone for an extended period of time. It was possible she was only going to be gone during the day, but a quick glance at the food prep station told me that wasn't the case. All the dishes had been washed and put away, and the small basket of fruit she kept around wasn't in sight. That means she'd tossed it in the conservator. That means she'd tossed it in the conservator so it wouldn't spoil while she was gone. The fridge? Come on. I continued my way into the apartment. I ducked my head into the darkened bedroom on the left, but saw no signs of life there. The dining area, which abutted the food prep station on the right, was likewise devoid of life. The main table had a couple days' worth of dust on it, and the data card that had been set near my place likely held all my messages. What does that mean? The data card that had been set near my place likely held all the messages that had come in for me up to the time Mirax left. That is hard to say for some reason. Let's try it one more time. I'm sorry. Just bear with me. The main table had a couple days' worth of dust on it, and the data card that had been set near my place likely held all the messages that had come in for me up to the time Mirax left. It's the best you're going to get out of that sentence. In the living room area, off to the left, I saw a light blinking on the holotable. I smiled. Good girl. You didn't leave without giving me a message. I shucked my jacket and tossed it on a Nerf hide chair. That's the second Nerf reference. You'd Nerf hurt her. Then crouched down and hit the button below the light. Standing 45 centimeters tall and as beautiful as ever, Mirax smiled at me. Even in miniature, her black hair shined lustrously and fire filled her brown eyes. She wore the black boots and dark blue jumpsuit in which I'd first seen her, and had a blue Nerf hide. Another Nerf thing! Okay, let's not overdo the Nerf. It gets referenced one time in Empire Strikes Back, and there it is. I had a blue Nerf hide jacket slung over her shoulder. A small canvas satchel rested at her feet. Corin, I'd hoped to be here when you got back, but I've got a run I can't turn down. I'll tell you all about it when I get back. You should only be lonely for about a day. If my plans change, I'll let you know. She bent to pick up her satchel, then smiled at me again as she straightened up. I love you. Don't forget it and don't doubt it. Ever. I'll be back home soon. Love. I'll be back home soon, love. She didn't say love like on its own. I'll be back home soon. Love. Her image dissolved into static, then the holopad shut itself off. I reached out to run the message again, but hesitated. I'd come home to dozens of such messages during our time together, as had she, and never before had I wanted to play one again. Why do I want to now? It struck me that I might be feeling a bit cheated and a bit vulnerable. I had spent the better part of my time away from her, thinking about children, and had finally come around to the point of view, and she was gone. I'd made one of the most important and momentous decisions of my life, and she was just off flitting about the galaxy as if my decision was no big thing. To have it treated so casually stung a bit, and I wanted to hear her say again that she loved me. As much as I knew my analysis of my emotions was true, I also knew my emotions were not at the core of my problem. I hit the button and listened to her message again, then nodded. She said I'd only be lonely for a day or so, and that if she had a change of plans, she would let me know. The fact was, however, that I had been a full day late because of our escorting the Glitter Star here to Coruscant. So she should have been here. I'd had no message from her about a delay here or at Squadron HQ, and that surprised me. Others might have taken the phrase, about a day, and have seen it as a fairly loose measure of time, but to Mirax it was painfully exact. She made her living delivering items of value to various clients, on time and intact. If she had meant 12 standard hours, she'd have said so. If she meant 25 hours, she'd not have rounded them down to a day. She would have given me her best estimate, to the hour or minute. As damning and worrisome as that might seem, I knew better than to panic. Any message could have been delayed or misrouted. She could have even stopped off to see her father on the errant venture, and his communication system could be down again. A shiver ran down my spine, but I shrugged it off. Your good news will just have to wait, I guess. Still feeling a little achy and tired from the run home, I stripped my clothes off and hit the refresher station. I like that. I might call my shower that, refresher station. And cleaned myself up, then dropped into bed. I left the bedroom door open in the hopes that I'd awaken when Mirax returned. Scant chance of that. I dropped into a deep sleep, dark and black, like the deepest shadow on Coruscant. I realized I was drifting off and tried to seek out the dream about the child, hoping my decision would paint more details onto him, but that eluded me. Consciousness evaporated in a pool of nothingness, and I fell into a dreamless sleep. Corrin. I stirred at the sound of my name, but I couldn't recognize the voice. Corrin! Mirax's shriek ripped me to wakefulness. I sat bolt upright in bed and reached out for her. The image of her face faded from before my eyes as my hands encountered only cold sheets where she should have been. I felt about for her, seeking the warmth that her body should have deposited there, but I found none of it. For all of a heartbeat, my brain chastened me with a flash of Mirax's message. Then something more horrible slammed into me. Bile surged up into my throat, choking me. In one blindingly terrible moment, I knew Mirax was gone. And that's the end of Chapter 2. Ho ho! What do you know about that? That's a good Chapter 2. So now, we've gotten more of a handle on Corrin as a character. He's very analytical. As was quickly mentioned, he worked for the Corellian security force. So he's got some sort of training along those lines. He was some kind of investigator or something. And we know that much for sure. And we know that his wife is missing. So that's an interesting twist, right? Who could have foreseen something like this? So yeah, that's where we're going to stop for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I tried to keep my reading a little bit more in check. Hopefully I got a little bit better this time, and I can continue that for next time. I appreciate you listening, and I hope you're enjoying it so far. I'm a big fan of this book, or at least I was when I first read it, and I hope it holds up. Because I didn't reread it before this. I haven't read this book in, probably 15 years, realistically. Something like that. So, yeah, it may be terrible, I don't know, but I remember loving it, and that's what we're going to go with. So, again, thank you for listening. May the Force be with you, and I will be back with the next chapter soon. Thanks. Bye.